Another edition of the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast. Episode number 25, in fact, our silver anniversary. Gifts are welcome. I'm your host, Alan Walker, and along with my co-hosts, Toby, Culshaw and Alison Ettridge, in this episode we spoke with Anastasiia Kolos, Market Intelligence Lead at Nexperia. In his news bit, Toby covered topics like the impact of the war in Ukraine on tech skills migration across Europe, in particular into Poland, youth unemployment levels in China, and much more. And in our chat with Anastasiia, we discussed treating talent as strategic human capital, not just headcount numbers, building agile talent intelligence teams that partner closely with the business, the potential of skills-based hiring and how companies aren't operationally ready for it yet, Anastasia's career path from executive search into talent intelligence, and her vision for bringing together external talent intelligence and internal workforce analytics, and a ton more. So get comfy, get listening, get learning, and stay intelligent, folks. Now let's get into the podcast. Before we get on with the main event, I just wanted to remind you that this podcast is proudly sponsored by our friends at Stratagens, and here's a very well-spoken chap to tell you a little bit more about them.
Stratagens gives HR leaders the data they need to transform businesses with the speed and ease required in today's world. If you're ready to make decisions that aren't lengthy, costly, one-dimensional, or based on gut feeling, visit stratagens.com. That's stratagens.com to register for a Wednesday demo drop-in and find out more.
Hello, I'm the real Alan Walker, back in the hosting seat for episode 25 of the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast. Joining me today are the authentic human versions of Toby and Alison. Say hello, fellow humans.
Hello, humans.
Fellow humans.
They're very literal there. I was referring to you as the fellow humans rather than needing to repeat that exactly, but it will do. And we have an actual flesh and blood guest, Anastasiia Kolos. Anastasiia, welcome to the podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Anastasiia Kolos, Market Intelligence Manager at Nexperia. In my role, I've been already 5 years in talent intelligence in my current role, focusing on all matters talent intelligence and human capital analysis, looking at external talent labor markets, trying to stay ahead of talent trends and really being a trusted advisor for our business. Happy to be here in this group.
Excellent. Thank you, Anastasiia. And we're going to hear much more from you later. Welcome. For any listeners who listened to the last episode, you'll have got the kind of reinforcement of the word human in my intro. You're probably mortified by this actually massively depressing AI renditions of ourselves. But you'll be pleased to know that this time it's 100% real people all the way through. I might be a bit rusty, though, since the AI did so much of the heavy lifting last time, so I'll try and jump back into smooth podcasting mode. As ever, once I'm done with the preamble or the pre-ramble, I can never decide, Toby will cover the latest human-created talent intelligence news, and we'll all have a nice old people-centered chat about it. And then Alison will humanly interview our human guest. Then I'll attempt to close out like a normal human podcaster. We'll see if I can pull it off. All right, so let's give this human-powered podcast a go. It's without doubt going to be better than the robotic one from a few weeks back. For now. Toby, over to you for some real human headlines.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to start off in reverse order with a nod to our generative AI overlords that are coming. So this is a human talking, but talking about the Gen AI overlords. I saw a post by the awesome Glenn Cathy on LinkedIn, and it was talking about a product called air.ai. Oh, I don't know if that's the product's name. That's the URL, so I'm just going to go with that for now. But it was a tool that essentially had a demo, a video of a sales business development conversation where it was a telephone sales pitch where somebody was dialing up and saying, I'm not interested in XYZ product. And then the system automatically responded to the inquiries and any kind of handling of any kind of challenges or, the whole kind of usual sales patter, etc. and it was fascinating. Like the depth of the conversation, how natural the conversation was, the way it did kind of response management and objection handling. It was really, really fascinating. And obviously the obvious thinking for TA is how that could work with either sourcing and outreach or that initial phone screen. And you need obviously to feed it with the relevant info from a TA perspective. But there's a lot you can dig into in terms of the AIA demo and how staged that was versus natural, et cetera, et cetera. But the concept was fascinating. The fact that this wouldn't be one conversation; it could be 10, 100,000, million. There's no limit to the number of conversations. It really does open up an interesting Pandora's box of what does that initial first stage screening call look like and the objection handling look like. For any kind of sales pitch, both from an internal reaching out to candidates, but also agencies reaching out to recruiters and hiring managers trying to sell in their services. I think it's a really fascinating Pandora's box we're opening.
Oh, I just, you don't know, I'm embracing, because of what we do, right? We embrace machine learning, we embrace AI. It's core and integral to what we're doing. I listened to this, Toby, and I was just like, down. I couldn't think of anything else to write because I was just like, it just didn't cut it. It just sounded a bit like our version of the podcast. So for me, it was just really interesting. I went, the key skills for any person in a BD role or any outreach role are listening, interaction, and human behaviour. And if we're thinking about skills first, I think it's got a long way to go before we need to be too scared about this version of AI.
I would agree with the caveat of what you're describing there is a good salesperson. And I think we discussed this a little while back in terms of automation and et cetera. I think good people, whatever your jobs are probably safe from automation. It's the people that aren't good. It's the average. It's the bog standard and the poor that are going to get automated. And I think when you compare that sales pitch to some of the bog standard, average, and poor ones you get, I think it holds up pretty strong, particularly for a first gen. I agree. I think once you start getting to the more subtle and once you start getting to the better sales individuals, 100%. It can't replace them. It won't replace them, I don't think. But I think the bog standard and average and also the scale, I think that still has its space within the field.
Very cool. That cockerel in the background just reminded me, Alan, we didn't get a yay.
Oh, no, we didn't.
Sorry.
Let me do a yay now. We can't not forget the yay. Let's go.
Yay! Yay!
There we are. Delayed yaying.
Thank you. There we are.
And apologies
well,
for the
if AI was running this, it would have been way more efficient and that would have come out at the beginning, wouldn't it? But to your I've looked at Toby, and I'm unlike Alison, I'm actually blown away by it. I think it's incredible. I think it's I think the tone, absolutely, you can tell it's not human. Yeah. I think some of the ability to deal with those objections and the depth of the answers has blown me away. I signed up 2 or 3 days ago for an account with it because I'm going to experiment the hell out of it. You guys know me and my passion for all this stuff. And I'll report back maybe on the next podcast we do with some stuff that's been relevant to my world, and we'll give it a real kind of tire kicking. But I think the potential is massive.
Well, that would be cool because actually our next podcast is with you, isn't it? So
yes.
Yeah, so you reporting on AI in the world of TA, so that would be really good. And actually, I think if I think more sensibly, what it was saying was brilliant. You're right, it was tone.
Yeah.
Anastasia, please just interrupt us, otherwise we'll just waffle on.
Yeah, sure. No, I totally agree that there is still room to improve for the machine or robot, however we call it. But it's just so fascinating to, when we as in-house talent intelligence advise different businesses on, the future of work and skills for them, like data or technology, but this is also a future of work for us as TA. Yeah. And then how we learn to work together is definitely going to be an exciting journey for the next years, I don't know, or decades, how we just make friends with these tools.
I love the idea of making friends with them.
Well, I think it's great. I hadn't thought about it in that perspective, but it is. If you're suddenly going to your VP of customer service saying, well, actually, rather than setting up this customer service contact center in whatever shared service location, we look to automate in this way. Like customer service, first point of contact, everyone complains that they can't talk to a human anymore. I think if you're phoning up and that you get that kind of automated response, I think that it's good enough that you probably would feel like you've been talking to a human. And is it perfect? No, but I think for things like that, contact centers, I think it could be fascinating.
Let's remember, there's some absolutely appalling salespeople.
Yeah.
Come on. Without being too brutal, there are some absolute shockers who clearly know nothing about their product, company, etc., and they're just kind of running through a script. And anything they remotely left field or a slight curveball, and actually they turn into computers. We all remember the old Little Britain sketch. You might not, Anastasia. It's a very UK-centric comedy. Computer says no. That's humans doing that. At least with this computer, it's probably unlikely to say no because it'll actually be half decent.
It would say, that's a really interesting question. Let me have
Let me think about the answer for a moment.
See, I'm not sold. You can tell, can't you? I kind of came on the journey then. I was feeling a bit like a Luddite, and then you gave that scenario, and I was like, no, I can just imagine it going, that's not a good question. And me slamming the phone down in fury and thinking, I just want to talk to an individual. I'm back in my Luddite chair.
You can definitely spot the spectrum of the person that's probably the strongest on the sales front out of us, and then me, the other end of the spectrum that's useless at sales and is comfy in my comfy chair. I tip my hat to you, Alison. You know sales better than me.
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
Fab. What else is happening then, Toby?
There's loads of stuff around skills, and I found a few different news articles, and I was going to go through them individually, but honestly, I don't know if I've got the energy to. There's a big piece around. LinkedIn did a load of research around skills-based hiring, and the European labour market and the EU have kind of picked up on this, saying that your skills-first approach is needed, and it can reduce all versions of labour shortages and diversity issues. And that also ties into kind of the A-level results that came through in the UK recently, where you're suddenly seeing a big push of what do people do after that? Because they're going to get degrees. And, there's a huge piece of research from Indeed, and Anastasiia over at Indeed, the senior manager at TI there, was talking about how, we've seen a huge increase in the number of people stepping away from degrees and looking towards things like apprenticeships, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that there is kind of this big movement at the moment around skills-based hiring. And what does that look like? I think it's a fascinating movement. You're definitely seeing certain platforms pushing it very, very hard. LinkedIn are obviously pushing it very, very hard, primarily, I think, because there aren't many platforms out there to actually do skills-based hiring on properly. LinkedIn is one of the few platforms where you've got a big scale of profile-level data where you can look at these skills across different orgs and levels and et cetera. I still don't think we've kind of hit the nail on the head around what this actually means, though. How do you actually do this? How do you actually do skills-based hiring if you're a TA function? How do you actually hire somebody as a skills-based hire rather than against a job title? How does that fit into your compensation and benefits framework? How does that fit into your organizational design framework? How does that fit into your promotion pathing? If you're hiring for skills, and then we really should be promoting and performance managing against skills rather than against job frameworks and job titles, I think there's a long way to go. And I'm interested. I'm excited about where it's going, and I think skills-based is the future. I just think people are getting up on that hype train a bit too fast compared to kind of the operational practicality of how to actually do this stuff.
Completely agree. Completely. And that Stratton's has always put skills first. We built it right from the outset with skills. And the reality is that we've had to build in titles and roles to support skills because clients are not yet ready to do skills-based hiring. And I think there's all sorts of things that are happening, right, aren't there? Labour shortages are commonplace, and they will be for the foreseeable, right? So people are going to have to be skills first. But if you read the article, it said 3 core things to do. 1, understand the skills that you have and you need. 2, embrace a skills first strategy. And 3, develop your people. Every single company that I've spoken to will go, we haven't got a clue what skills we've got. Never mind what skills we need.
I love the level of detail there in their advice, because that's really helpful, isn't it? Do these things that are really difficult.
It was just like,
one, two, three.
So yeah, I mean, I absolutely, yeah. The reality is, it's absolutely right. There aren't enough people. We need to think differently. Skills first will bring more people into our population and our demographics. All perfect. Actually implementing it is the bit that's really hard, and it's those. I think there's two approaches. There's the kind of the workdays of this world with skills clouds who are able to tell you what skills you've got internally. And then there are the labour market analytics tools, which will tell you what the market looks like externally from a skills perspective. Yeah, but you've got to do a whole bunch of stuff first. It's nowhere near that easy.
Yeah, for me, it now feels that TA tech landscape is a little bit above and beyond what the company's mindset is with regards to the skills-based hiring or skills-based organizations. Looking at some surveys, how companies actually assess the skills. Okay, this is the skills that we need. How do we assess that? The first three ways to assess the most common is the work experience and then the university degree, which doesn't necessarily mean a skill, right? So how do we also change that mindset to still using the old proxies for a skill, such as a degree or a job title in your experience, versus some new approaches to really be open to that as hiring managers or as organizations?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think it's always the way, I think, isn't it? It's not necessarily just in the world of TA that the tech landscape is ahead. The very nature of the fact that, you've got scale-ups and you've got startups that go, well, there's a better way of doing this, means they always need to be ahead of companies. But we need to allow companies time to come on the journey and to understand what it is that they need to do to come on the journey, rather than just assume that it's really easy to do, because it isn't, I think.
I think that for me, the skills piece kind of lends into something that's kind of seemed to have fallen off the face of the earth in terms of conversation. It was everywhere, now it's gone nowhere, is the whole gig workforce piece.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at kind of the potential future of larger companies and internal mobility and internal gig networking, etc., that does fit into the framework of skills-based hiring quite nicely, because you can say, well, actually, I need a data engineer for this 3-month period or whatever it may be. But you need a sufficient scale to be able to have these talent pools internally and the talent bench that can flex between projects and everything else. And I don't see any companies anywhere near that conversation and anywhere near that level of internal sophistication of skills analysis. Because even as you say, with the Workdays and all the other platforms out there where you can have your talent cards, it's estimated that even with the previous CVing a talent card, even with the learner management system, you're still kind of nowhere near the total percentage of skills within an organization, because so many skills are learnt on the job. It was like 70-80% of skills are learnt on the job versus formal learning, right? That's really hard to track in anything near to real time.
Yeah, and I think it all ties back to workforce planning, doesn't it? Yeah, the organisations that have always been really strong at workforce planning are going to be a step ahead here. Right? Yep. And those organisations that have historically not been good at workforce planning are always going to be a step behind, because just the mentality of understanding, what is it we've got, never mind whether it's skills or roles, just that mentality, and then what is it we need is probably more important than jumping straight into skills first. Kind of total workforce planning or whatever we want to call it is going to be the key. Companies like Babcock, who are streets ahead in workforce planning, will be streets ahead in this space, I suspect.
Yeah.
Do you think this is somebody who's not particularly knowledgeable in this space, but do you think there's a risk that as we move to more and more skills-based hiring, etc., and then we have skill-based jobs, that those jobs by definition become narrower and narrower? So we end up with overly specialised roles that become less broad and less interesting.
Ooh.
Because in theory, if a human only has so much capacity to learn so many skills, so there's a limit on what they can potentially specialise in. Is there a risk there that roles that potentially before were a little bit fluid, a little bit broad, and actually different personalities, different skill sets could fit them and achieve results in different ways, but still get to where the organisation needs? Is there a potentially in the future where we start to pigeonhole stuff into these are the skills, that the roles themselves get a bit kind of narrow?
So I'm not.
Do you know what I'm saying?
I do. I'm not an expert in this, but my gut is telling me it's the reverse, and I don't know why my gut is telling me that. But actually, if you think about a role and you're saying, actually, this particular role is about listening skills, it's about communication skills, it's about interacting with senior execs, it's about data analysis, whatever it might be, right? If we're thinking about either sales or TI, then actually that makes that role quite broad. It means that the role of someone in TI could be the consultant, could be the person that's selling it internally, could be the person that's researching and delivering, depending on the skills that they have and possess.
Yeah.
So it might go the other way, which actually would then be even more confusing for an organisation, because then they'll be like, well, how on earth do we, you've still got to be able to put people into boxes in some way.
Yeah. I guess you almost, true skills-based hiring is you never hire against a job. You say that our organisation needs 90 people who can do X, 50 people who can do Y, and 10 people who can do this, or that percentage of skills, and you hire into that. So you might have somebody who comes along who's got a different mix of somebody else, but they're adding to the total that you need as an organisation. Yep. And you forget about the job titles to a certain degree and just worry about what they're bringing to the organisation. That itself then becomes massively complicated to manage, deciding who does what and who has responsibility for what. But in theory, that's the pure play, isn't it? I go and say, Toby, you're brilliant at X. I want you in the business. Let's not worry about a job title. I'm willing to pay you this for your time and your skill set that you're bringing. And we'll worry about what you do when you get here.
Exactly that. And that's where the internal gig mobility piece comes in. But until you can kind of have that fluidity around it, and I think there are companies that have played with this. If I remember rightly, Google X, the kind of experimental lab program, you used to be hired onto whatever team, whatever program, but you had total fluidity. So if you didn't like that program or that project, you could just move into another team. And so it really did flex your skills, but also the leadership capability of the program leads, I guess. So I think there probably is potentially a future where this works, but it's a fundamental change in how we, as HR, how we manage and how we structure and how we performance manage and everything. It really, for me, it's far more fundamental than a lot of people are giving it credit.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about performance management. That's like a whole nother kettle of fish.
Suddenly you have to performance manage on a project basis. If you're doing the gig thing on a project by project, on a gig by gig, how do you validate? How do you say, well, actually that person is a high performer versus the other individuals? Do you then have to suddenly cross-reference back to the person giving the reference? And it's a can of worms.
I suppose to a certain degree, you'd performance manage the project itself, working on the principle that an individual will work across 3, 4, 5 different projects. Yep. And if the running theme is every project they're on has been successful, or to varying degrees, then in theory, that person themselves is adding benefit to the organisation. If every project that person's on is a disaster, there's a running thread that says probably that person isn't adding much value. But it's a little bit more complicated than that, clearly.
Yeah. It's essentially a portfolio career internally.
I like it. Yeah, I would find that interesting, actually, as if I went back to anybody ever deeming me employable again. I definitely find that quite interesting, that kind of internal portfolio career in a larger organisation.
Yeah, I totally agree with Toby that the change is, I guess, is even more fundamental than we can even imagine. And I'm not sure if total workforce planning is the first part of it, because before that, you also have some strategizing on a company level and how the strategy sort of links to people elements.
Yes.
And the traditional thinking is so much about, okay, this is our strategy, this is the structure, which is about functions and titles that we need, but also how do we translate the company strategy into that organizational capacity from a skills lens, or also the size of the skills lens, but not from how many people in which direct function, and then it all just comes together. So it's even before that, there is also on the strategy level some discussion on, do we see our organization as a mix of functions and titles or skills? How do we understand that?
Yeah, and it's easy, isn't it? In all of these things, it's easy to think about it when you're thinking about hard skills. Right? It's much, much more difficult when you're talking about roles that don't necessarily have hard skills in. And that creates then a whole nother conversation. I think you're 100% right, Anastasiia.
Excellent. So what else is happening? Perhaps we do one more news article, because we've unusually spoken a lot about one particular thing. So maybe one more, and then we can move on to interviewing Anastasiia, Toby.
Yeah. So I've got one main one to talk about, but I'll touch on the other two quickly, just as a heads up. One of them that I saw that was quite interesting was China's youth really worrying about the tough job market and the youth unemployment rate being so high. It's record figure, 21%. Of people aged 16 to 24 are jobless, which is huge. But the bit that was most interesting to me about that was that the Chinese government have said they're going to stop publishing age-related employment data. And I think that kind of lends into the bigger concern about the Chinese working population and the fact they have been year over year getting much more restrictive on the employment data and the demographic data they're publishing. So I think that's a big can of worms we need to open up at some point. There was also a really interesting paper from the Trades Union Congress, the TUC in the UK, looking at, in their words, Britain's workers abused by the Tories and bosses, from racism to zero-hour contracts. And it was basically looking at how many, once again, in their words, black and brown workers are in insecure work, and that's more than doubled from 2011 to 2022, from 360,000 to over 800,000 individuals. Really, really interesting, and it breaks down the whole statistics of more than twice as likely than white men to be in insecure work. It just loads of really interesting stuff there, and I think there's lots of nuance and lots to dig into on that subject, but really interesting topic. But the last news piece I actually want to dig into is the Ukraine war and how Poland's labour market has changed through that period. And there was a few different bits. One was the overall number, so we had about 14 million Ukrainians crossing into Poland seeking refuge, which was obviously huge. We then also had a reversal with some of the displaced individuals eventually returning back to their homelands, which is about another 3 million. But it was the positive net impact of that was really fascinating. So Ukrainian refugees opening over 17,000 businesses in Poland during the first year of that conflict, which is, for context, normally in Poland you get about 7,000 businesses established year on year. So huge increase. The way that the Polish government is simplifying their whole processes and digitizing their residency and work permit procedures to kind of fast track this stuff and get things moving. For me, I found it fascinating, and I think it's something that we're not, as a TI industry, necessarily exploring enough of how the war is impacting tech skills across Europe, or skills across Europe, both from a Ukrainian perspective, and obviously we've spoken in the past about a Russian tech skills migration we've seen going through as well. So I thought, for me, it was a really interesting story and a really positive situation coming out of the terrible situation there.
And isn't it? I think one of the biggest things here is that we as a country, the UK, complain about a couple of 100,000 refugees coming to the country every year, whereas Poland has managed to effectively allow 3 million Ukrainians to make Poland their new home. It's incredible, and do it in a way that's benefited Poland as well as the refugees that are settling there. So it's incredible. And by the way, Toby, I think every time you do the news moving forward, you should have a cockerel in the room with you. I insist.
Do you know what? We one day, not on the podcast, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to swear, by the way, I'm going to tell you the story about Basil the bastard bantam cockerel. And he no longer exists in our household for several reasons.
You throttled him.
No. Basil lived to be 11, which is very old for a cockerel. I'll tell you a little bit now, but not all of it.
Yeah, we need to know now.
Yeah, because otherwise we won't talk to Anastasiia, which is way more important than Basil. But the day that he died of natural causes, I have to tell you, my daughter said, "Can I hug him, Mummy?" I kind of looked at her and went, "Yes, why?" And she went, "Well, let's be honest." She went, "All he's done is attack me for the last 10 years. At least now he's dead, I can have a hug." That was it.
Was he tasty?
No, we didn't. He was a bantam, so he was too little to go in the oven.
No.
He'd have been a bit scrawny and horrible. Anyway, that was Basil. Going back to Poland's labour market. I'm like you. I loved this. I loved it for the first reason, that was welcoming with open arms, right, and just a million miles away from where we have been as a nation. The second reason was actually, I think, really interestingly, Poland had made some real advances in their labour market, kind of 5 years ago, 10 years ago, to create the kind of next spot for talent, particularly around tech skills or if you were offshoring or outsourcing somewhere. And then what happened is that we started to see that in Poland, they actually became kind of a hotspot for talent as a result of that. And so actually they then lost the advantage of being a low-cost country for offshoring or outsourcing something. And now they've reinvented that themselves again and said, actually, here is a different way, and this is where the skills are, and this is a different way of approaching us. So it's incredibly clever as well, I think, in amongst everything else, and just goes to show the amazing amount of talent that is in both Poland and in Ukraine, and leaving Russia and the tech migration. I think the migration of skills, not necessarily Ukraine and Poland and Russia, I think the migration of skills is a really, really interesting topic.
Yeah. So I love the fact that we speak about this topic on the Independence Day of Ukraine. So it's just great that it all comes together. But it's also, again, about the skills economy, that not necessarily the refugees from Ukraine will work on the same jobs that they used to do in Ukraine, but because of the situation, their motivation to really stay open and agile in what they work on, what kind of skills they acquire, really helps the society to benefit from that. And I'm, of course, quite exposed to a lot of people who are impacted and are in Netherlands or in Poland. And most of people whom I personally know, they find a job not necessarily related to their original profession in Ukraine, but a lot in tech space. So definitely companies and even like scale-up startups are benefiting a lot from inflow of talent, but also of talent which is overly motivated and also open to learn new things.
And brilliant talent, yeah. So happy Independence Day, Ukraine.
Absolutely. Thanks. It was this time last year when I set off in a minibus to drive to the Ukraine border to bring back 17 Ukrainian refugees to the UK. Literally today that I set off on that journey. So, this is very meaningful.
Hats off.
Thank you, Alan.
I've got goosebumps now. That's it.
Well,
what are you doing with your life? What are we doing?
Toby, remember that conversation we had before the podcast where we said we haven't got all of the silly stuff out of the way before we start recording? It's starting to come to the table. I think that's me.
Feel like I've achieved nothing with my life. Right.
That wasn't my intent, by the way. It just kind of brought back a memory, and I'm going on holiday tomorrow, which isn't to Ukraine or Poland. I'm going somewhere hot and sunny, and I'm thinking how different my world is compared to last year. So we're very lucky. We're all very lucky people to a certain degree, aren't we?
Sure.
100%.
Anyway, shall we move on to finding out more about Anastasiia? We've heard about her view on some of the news, of course, but Alison, I think it's your turn to step up and let's hear more about Anastasia's work.
Cool, fab. Thank you very much. Anastasiia, thank you for being on the podcast. You and I haven't connected actually in the past. So this is a really interesting one because I don't kind of come to the conversation with any kind of prior views or knowledge of you, which I think was really interesting. And so I'd written down kind of some standard questions, but then you said human capital analysis when you were doing your introduction. I was like, yes, here's somebody who talks about human capital. So that made me really, really excited. So can you talk a little bit more about you kind of why you call it human capital and then what you mean by human capital analysis?
Yeah. First of all, is also to get and step away a little bit from this traditional focus on how much people we hire, and when we talk about the FTEs or a number of contractors, whatever, I think it's just a discussion which is changing, of course, a lot these days in the industry, but will be changing more as we speak about the skills. And also, I also view human capital as not just a sum of people, but if you add one skill to another, the sum is much bigger than, just the individual parts. Yeah. And also in the industry that I currently work in, semiconductors, it's a very interesting industry. It's very different, of course, from my time at Philips. Yeah. A lot of the same challenges that many other companies and industries are facing, such as talent shortage. But the way how it's volatile and also subject to many other influences from external worlds, it also doesn't make it much relevant to only speak about, okay, how many people we have in which location when we speak about location strategy, but thinking more broadly, what do we need, what kind of capital we want to build on the human side, and how it will enable us to achieve our strategy and our ambitions. This is where I try to focus on, and so far it lands quite well with the business, because I think that that business partnering that we speak about, and TA and HR, is also a little bit understanding that the finance people or business people would think about it as a capital, as one of the assets,
Yes.
And not just the people or the job titles or the FTEs.
I love that. Thank you. I talk about human capital a lot, and then some people shoot me down. And you've just summed it up brilliantly, right? This is not about just the sum of the people. It's about the sum of the skills that we have as an organisation, and thinking about them as an integral part of our strategy.
Yep.
And when you start to treat the skills that we have as an asset, and I've said for years, if we started to treat our access to financial capital in the same way that we treat access to the skills we need to deliver our strategy, most companies would have been belly up very quickly. And so it's helping business leaders, isn't it, to make that connection and conversation. So how did that then flow into, because I think I'm right in saying you set up the team at Nexperia. So how did that then flow into the initial conversations of what the team is about and the sorts of things that you are likely to deliver?
I think it again, if we start with a vision with a focus on the human capital, then for me it was a bit logical that it means that we not only focus on bringing the data on the size of the talent pools, the cost and some location strategy related topics, but not only what we need, right, what skills we need, but also how things work together. And that ties, of course, a lot into some org design topics, different ways of working topics. And, that was a little bit a vision or the goal to bring this all together and really focus on not only the talent supply, demand, and costs, which are really very traditional and very brilliant and valuable insight from a talent intelligence perspective, but also trying to explain how to make things work together efficiently. If we speak about the skills, okay, but how do we organize those skills into some kind of teams or some kind of functions? So that's a little bit the focus, as a twofold. And also I'm really trying to somehow bring together the perspective from talent acquisition team, HR, and the business. Of course, we all work towards the common goal and achieving our company ambition, but then we all have different perspectives. So it's also how we structure our projects and our activities is pretty much adopting the lens of the stakeholder for HR or TA or business, and then making sure that we really bring those pieces together. And I'm really love to see how open and how, curious all the stakeholders are, and really with a lot of appetite for data and also a lot of appetite for insights. So I'm quite lucky, to be honest, with a lot of support, of course, from HR team. But I thought it would go a little bit slower in the beginning when you start to get some projects and requests, and you start to show the value. But it got super fast with a lot of request demand coming in. So a lot of work keeps us super busy. So that's really good.
That's brilliant. Do you report into talent acquisition, or do you report into HR? Yeah, okay. Can you talk a little bit about the shape of your team? So, sort of, how many people are in the team, and how do you then kind of balance some of the strategic projects that you've been talking about against what we would call the stuff that, in an ideal world, you want the TA team to be self-serving on?
Yeah, I think the Nexperia is a very fast-paced environment, which also means that we as a team should be fast-paced, and really trying to be very agile in how we prioritize our work, really following what's on the agenda for the business at this particular moment of time. The team is still quite small, right? We started half a year ago. We have three, apart from myself, 3 people currently across the globe. And the skill set is mostly management consulting or human capital consulting on the team. So we really try to approach it from the consulting point of view with some frameworks and methodologies to really bring advice. However, what is really unique and very different from how I experienced it during Philip's time is how closely I am connected to the global TA team. And so we sort of work together in all the projects. We always set up a project team with some people from my team. So really that market intelligence and the talent acquisition team, and it really works perfectly fine. As I've said, the industry is very unique. You have to be very specialized in knowledge of your markets, of your particular country, and the TA team is really brilliant. So, and also very open to, exploring new ways to bring data to impact the hiring strategy. And we really try to make sure that we work all together on the projects.
Really interesting. Look, you're in a world where skills shortages are screaming, but as you said, actually there are many more external factors that are limiting your ability to grow as a business, right? Assets. If you think about assets, skills happens to be one of those, right? But some of it is actually material, physical material, isn't it? Yep. And those sorts of things. So that's forcing the joining of the dots, if you like. I love that. You did a master's in strategic management, I think, which explains why it doesn't explain why you're so intelligent. That's a bit harsh, but it's one of the reasons why you're definitely talking in a language that is very commercial and very strategic. What was the plan when you did that? Did you ever think that this was a space that you would end up in market intelligence?
Oh, definitely not. It was a very coincidence, but a very happy coincidence, I would say. Before actually doing the master in strategic management, I had some experience in executive search in Ukraine, and I really loved that industry. Like when I joined that, I had no idea what it was. As a bachelor student of second year, you have no idea what executive search is, what executives actually do, how to hire them. But it was really interesting. And that's, of course, definitely helped me build some passion for the people side, really understanding that a good top manager in a company is one of the core elements of the success of the company. So that was quite interesting to at least get an idea of what the human capital is, because I think in Ukraine also, not sure about other countries, but maybe it's the same, but there is a lot of, some prejudice or some image about what HR is, and it's called as very operational, admin focused. And that executive search environment was very different. And we worked with very different type of people, obviously. But then during the master program, there was actually a presentation about Philips and talent intelligence team from the brilliant Gerrit, whom we all know here on this group. And I actually was not there, but my boyfriend was. And he was like, it sounds like something what you would enjoy. And then that's how I actually got to talent intelligence world, and extremely happy about that decision.
How cool! So Gerrit and your boyfriend, Nexperia, have a lot to say thank you for, frankly.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm interested in. We talk to a lot of people, and I'm in this same pool, right? Who've come from executive search at the beginning of their career, and then sort of moved, through research into insight, and then into intelligence and market intelligence. If you look back now at generally speaking at executive search, so not at any particular business, but generally speaking, what do you think are the opportunities that industry is missing from a TI or a market intelligence point of view?
That's a good question. I always was of an idea that the idea of doing talent intelligence or that research into the industry from the angle of talent and people actually came from executive search. Because I remember that, the company I worked for was very focused on really understanding the industry ecosystem, the people who work in this particular industry, how it's moving, shifting. So that industry research, I think, was very strong, and we sort of course, advanced it with the talent intelligence tools and the problem statements that we have. But thinking of what's missing, maybe, with that exposure to the top management from the candidates and from the client point of view, maybe that you're also trying to influence that mindset of top managers of what the talent is. And, earlier we spoke about the skills, and one of the bottlenecks to adopting that skills-based organization is actually the mindset of top managers in companies. So maybe also being that channel to bring some out, translate the messages about human capital and not just, people, HR, would be an opportunity. But I honestly haven't been in that industry for already quite some years, and I'm not sure what the current state of executive search landscape is.
No, me neither. But I think I've still kind of got this view that could be completely wrong. That in some executive search organisations, you have this always-on intelligence that's looking at industry, it's looking across the board, whilst in others, it's still reacting to a particular environment because that's where you make your fees, right? So, and I just think that the power of the information that you can gather in an executive search conversation and how that then gets aggregated and used for intelligence purposes or market insights purposes, I think it's still an opportunity that's potentially being missed by some organisations in that space. But I don't. As I said, that's kind of a gut feel. I'm not sure I've got anything to back it up really. So talk to me about what your time at Philips gave you. So kind of what were the takeaways that you then took forward into Nexperia? Because I think you had a fantastic training ground.
Oh, yes. It was an amazing time of my life. And first of all, meeting people, like Toby and Harriet and many other colleagues from Philips and learning from really the brilliant minds. That was definitely the key takeaway. And first of all, secondly, also learning about what the talent intelligence is, and that it actually exists, and that it's a very cool environment or industry to work at. Of course, a lot of exposure to the corporate world because, as a student or also in Ukraine, you don't have, of course, such big corporates or especially the headquarters. So being in that global HQ environment of a great company, great in terms of also the size, products, where they are, with also their HR strategy, was a great exposure and learning. Many things. It's so difficult to summarize because it feels like being a graduate and then entering that first part of your career or like a first big corporate in your career is a big challenge for many. Also going through the news that we had on today, Toby, on the youth unemployment. So that was like exploring the whole new world of very big corporate environments. And I must say I enjoyed it a lot, and going through different changes in terms of the strategy, in terms of the organic and inorganic growth of the company was also interesting because what you actually read in books about mergers, acquisitions, divestments, or strategizing or program management, strategy execution, and then you go in a company where you can see how it's been implemented. Not to say by the books, but it's been actually implemented in reality. So linking the theory to the practice was also a very, very good experience and really valuable.
Really interesting. Could you talk about the kind of core user cases now for TI in your world?
A lot. As I've said, our industry is is very interesting. Just to cite Deloitte, right? Because every year they produce some industry outlook also for semiconductors. And the outlook for this year is called Balancing Shortage and Oversupply. And for me, it's like really my mind is exploding, right? We have both shortage and we have oversupply in the industry. And that's, a little bit first, how do you understand it? How do you make sense of it? But also, how do you work with that?
Can you help me understand it? Because you've blown my mind. I don't know how that works.
I think they have a lot of shortage in terms of talent, in terms of some materials, so supply chain shortage. Yeah. But on the other hand, there is also an oversupply or overproduction of some items or materials. So how do you balance that, creating the right strategy? That's, of course, the company task, but also from a talent perspective, how do you balance that? Is how do you create also that agility of the organization to meet the oversupply and shortage? Is an interesting task. And talent shortage is a big issue in the semiconductor industry. I think one of the two biggest, with supply chain and the talent shortage being really the core. So that creates a lot of work, and that creates, of course, a lot of impact on how do we tackle the talent shortage? How do we get the right talent on board? Where do we get that? So those kind of traditional talent intelligence use case on location strategy and hiring strategy, finding the right talent, finding the right skills, finding the right mix, and attracting them to the company is a big question and a big focus. And here also is interesting, that's what I do not really recall that much from Philip's side, is the amount of influences that you have outside of your company. And that's not only customers, right? Not only consumer demands, but also geopolitics, world economy, supply and, supply of materials, which also means the extraction of materials and the supply of products. It's all really influencing, and every month you have some volatile indexes. So that's kind of interesting, because you cannot say, well, this is our location, talent location strategy for the next 10 years, because the environment is changing every month or every half year. So we try to also in that location strategy, try to distinct a little bit some best practices, or how do we actually do our location strategy versus a more operational, okay, but what do we do now? But that's a big focus. And of course, a lot of focus on market intelligence and some use cases with competitive insights. I think that's what I was talking on the talent intelligence Jamboree half a year ago. Yes. How can we actually use talent intelligence to analyze the competition, the markets? That's not a big use case. Also seen a lot of application and appetite from business stakeholders so far.
Can you give 2 or 3 top tips on if you're looking through competitive intelligence or market intelligence? Can you give 2 or 3 top tips to someone who is just trying to persuade their business leaders that TI is more than looking at how do we hire and how do we attract to the company?
Yeah, I think first tip is to ask a lot of questions, because that would maybe help to open up that mind or perception from the business side that, well, I'm talking to that talent acquisition team, and what they do, they will hire some people for me. And then when you ask questions to, understand, okay, but what's your business challenge? Not what do you want me to do now for this particular requisition, but what are you trying to achieve as a business? What's the challenges you have? What's the bottleneck in terms of how you want to scale your business? What are your priorities? So maybe asking those questions will, in the beginning, transfer the discussion from being focused on where and how we hire 5-10 people for the particular team, I don't know, to from a longer term perspective or from a more high level, what do we actually need as a business? And then that leads maybe to a second tip, trying to really understand a little bit how things are connected to each other when we speak about strategy. then the strategy execution, then the organizational structure or the human capital, how it then translates actually to talent acquisition, to hiring forecasting. What is that, right? How it's being done? Is it just the replacements? Is it the growth? So trying to maybe draw, I don't know, or understand the company or the organization as a big puzzle, and to make sense how all these puzzles come together would also help to get a good idea what is actually needed from the talent insights or talent acquisition insights, human capital insights point of view to really address the right problem at hand. So.
And that explains a lot. The way that you answer that question explains a lot about the skills of the why you have the skills of the individuals in your team that you have, right? And I think that's really interesting, right? Because this is all about consulting and really understanding the strategy and where talent fits within a part of that, right? It is one of the pieces of the jigsaw, and not the whole picture. Right. It reminds me, we actually did a jigsaw. It actually reminds me, we did a jigsaw as a kind of marketing gimmick, I think, many years ago, which had talent and location and kind of geopolitical environment and all sorts of things, all in the middle of the jigsaw. I'll have to try and find it and send you one. I think it's interesting. It's been really, really fascinating talking with you. I think I'd just like to ask one more question, if I may.
Sure.
And that is, what do you think the future of TI should be?
That's a good one. I'm taking too big of a pause to think about it.
You're fine. You don't take.
I think bringing together the internal. So that really the people analytics, that total workforce planning, or total workforce strategy, future of work, and talent intelligence together, for me, it makes a lot of sense. Because, as I said, maybe a third tip that I forgot to mention in your previous question was to also always challenge yourself as TI. When you look at your presentation or your Word document, whatever, what you want to share with stakeholders, and ask yourself, so what, right? So what does it tell you? And for me, if we really build that future or achieve that future for talent intelligence, when the internal, the workforce strategy, the future of work and talent intelligence comes together, then it really helps to answer that question of so what, right? So what does this amount of data that we all have and share, so what does it tell us, and how we can actually act on that? For me, just would be maybe a little bit more efficient in a sense of really creating some tractions and achieving some steps for organization based on the talent intelligence research or people analytics outside insights as well.
I think that's so. One of the things that we're definitely seeing in our client base is that companies that started with us in a kind of a self-serve using the software, those that are more mature and have now got really good people analytics data are definitely now moving to API data feeds, where it's how can we integrate the data with our internal data, because that's when it starts. We talk a lot about it, right? That's when magic happens. Internal and external is magic. So 100% on the same page. Anastasiia, I've loved talking to you. You've talked about all sorts of things like human capital, where I've got, oh my God, it all just makes utter sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Great questions, and thanks.
I got two good questions. When Nick used to be on the podcast as well, and hopefully he'll come back and join us again at some point, he always used to get people going, oh, great question. I never used to. I was like, no. It used to make me sulk a lot. And now he's not here. I don't have to sulk. It's cool.
And I think on that note, guys, Anastasiia, by the way, you've been an amazing guest. Thank you so much for having you on the show. How's it been for you?
For me,
yeah,
it's really amazing time. It feels like also talking to friends whom I know already a lot of time. So that's really great. Thanks for having me a lot, and I also enjoy the questions, Alison, a lot, because good question also provokes a lot of thinking, and maybe it leads to some new ideas. So it's been a lovely discussion. Enjoyed loads.
Well, I don't ask the questions.
Yeah.
Don't have any good ones, and it doesn't provoke any kind of thought or interest.
Oh. I think Toby needs propping up a little bit, Alison, that we need to tell him he asked really good questions.
That's why
give him the confidence.
That's why I was demoted to the news.
That is so not true. Anastasia, are you going to come to the world's first in-person Global Talent Intelligence Conference in the Netherlands at the end of September?
Absolutely, and I'm hoping to see all of you, and I'm hoping to see a lot more TI peers from all over the globe.
I think that will happen. That's fantastic news. Brilliant.
Now the pressure's on to get this published before then, isn't it? Otherwise,
Yeah.
this is going to be very confusing.
No pressure.
The pressure's on anyway because we've talked about this being National Independence Day for Ukraine, right? And it has to therefore go out quite quickly.
Oh, that was not
true.
so smart to mention that.
No, it was fine.
It's fine. I'll make sure at the beginning of the intro that I timestamp it when I record that later, so that's fine.
There you go.
We'll be good. Anyway, it's Anastasia again. It's been great having you. I'm going to call this thing to a stop. We need to release everybody involved back into the real world. To our listeners, as usual, massive thanks for looking after us, for supporting us, for sharing the podcast. Keep doing that. Keep telling everybody about us. And if you haven't got any real friends in the real world, join the Talent Intelligence Collective Facebook group or the WhatsApp group. Whilst both of those have still got users, you'll find a ton of like-minded people there. And as usual, stay intelligent, folks. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Before you go, I wanted for the last time to remind you about our generous sponsor, Stratagens. Here's that posh chap again, telling you about their fabulous product.
Stratagens gives HR leaders the data they need to transform businesses with the speed and ease required in today's world. If you're ready to make decisions that aren't lengthy, costly, one-dimensional, or based on gut feeling, visit stratagens.com. That's stratagens.com to register for a Wednesday demo drop-in and find out more.